Good morning, everybody. I'm Ian Campbell with Alpha Capital, and I wanted to welcome you this morning. I am the financial advisor on the 401k plan, along with my partner, Mark L. So you've got two financial advisors that you can reach out to and ask assistance on your retirement plan. Today's call is really to go over the benefit of the 401k plan, talk about the importance of saving, and also the enrollment process. We're going to kind of do it in a couple stages to go over the documents. Rob was provided an email with these attachments that we'll be reviewing. I know he's put together some other kind of details in a packet form for you. If there's something that you're missing, just reach out to him and he can provide that to you. If there's any questions, just holler out. We'll stop and get that answered, and we'll go ahead and get things kicked off. The first piece of this whole process is completing the enrollment form or the online enrollment. And the first page or the first document that I want to go and look at and spend a little bit of time on is the step one of the online enrollment process. And the reason why we're doing this in the beginning is if you forget anything else that we talk about today, this second page and this website link and this first step is really the initial step, and then everything else is pretty self-explanatory. But for the first part, you're going to go to a website, which is the provider's website for your login and setting up your registration. The website is here, yourplanaccess.net/retirement plan consultants. Retirement plan consultants is your 401k provider. They're somebody that would be familiar of other 401k providers would be like a Fidelity, John Hancock, Empower, TD Ameritrade, Transamerica. Those types of companies are providers. Retirement plan consultants fills that purpose for the plan. So they're going to be your website that you're going to log into both on the onset, but also all future logins as well to see your account, make any adjustments to your investments and so on. So you'll go to this website, and I've actually got it pulled up on my screen here that I want to show you just to create some familiarity of what the website looks like. For the initial step, you're going to go and click online enrollment in the top left corner of this gray box, and that's going to flip that little box to typing in a plan password. And then once you hit the plan password, you'll hit next, and it'll ask you to put in your date of birth and social security number to verify it. For the plan password is right in the middle here, IMPR, and then DES. And it is all capital letters, so it is case sensitive, so make sure you are putting in those capital letters, and something to be mindful of. After you click next, there'll be following steps that will help you and walk you through that online enrollment process. And starting on page 9 of this document, this online enrollment packet, there's actually screenshots and then that exact workflow, what you'll need to do by typing in the plan password, entering your social security number and date of birth and so on. And it has screenshots that'll walk you through it. Also on that website that we did have up, there's actually a YouTube video that folks can actually watch as well. It's similar to those screenshots on that page 9 through 15, but if you wanted a little bit more of a hand-holding process, you can watch this video here, and it'll help assist you as well. So any questions on that first initial step? Okay, so I'm gonna kind of switch gears a little bit and flip over to the PDF enrollment packet. And that enrollment packet does have a paper form, which is the first kind of second and third page of the document. In addition to that document, there's also a great deal of information in this packet. There's 55 pages, so be mindful if you are going to be printing something, just to go and make sure you are printing the appropriate pages. The enrollment packet also does include fact sheets for the investments, which we'll spend a little bit of time on as well. The enrollment application starts with just your contact information, self-explanatory there. The one piece of information that's going to be probably unique to each of you that you may not have front of mind is your date of hire. So get with Rob, confirm that information does match up with his records as well. You will need to put that information in on the online enrollment as well. The reason why we're talking about the paper form is you are able to complete that. We really recommend everybody do the online enrollment. It's more secure, it's faster, and it's safer and easier for a lot of people. So please complete that if you can. The one form too, this is more for you, Rob, is if there is employees that do not want to participate in the plan, the first enrollment election option below, I elect not to contribute in the plan. You will have to complete the paper form if you don't want to participate. and that form will serve as a waiver. And then Rob, you'll keep this on file in your records just to show you that you've presented the benefit to the employee and they at that time said no. If you do say no now, you can also re-enroll back into the plan every 6 months. So if you say no today, you can essentially start in January 1. If you say no in January 1 again, you can start in July 1. So there's semi-enrollments or semi-annual enrollment periods. So, and one thing for you, Rob, is if they do fill out a waiver and they say no, then you don't have to get them to complete a new waiver every single quarter. That will just, or sorry, every single 6 months. It'll just stay on file.
Yeah, no is no until it's
okay. So the next part section really starts the questions that folks are facing as they complete the online enrollment and completing the online enrollment process. And the first option is a traditional contribution. The next option is a Roth contribution, or another way to say it is a pre-tax contribution or an after-tax contribution. And the difference between those two are when the money is taxed. It's either on the onset in a Roth 401k account and you're taxed in today's dollars or in your today's tax bracket, or you'd be taxed in retirement as you withdraw that money. Most people are familiar with the traditional route, or that first of the two. This would be the pre-tax option. So pre-tax and traditional are one and the same. And that would be when you would put money in pre-tax, but then you would pay the appropriate tax rate in retirement at that later date. Again, we don't know what tax rates are going to be in 20, 30, 40 years from now. So it is somewhat of a crystal ball kind of guess of what may be better or worse for an individual person given their circumstances. So depending on your tax bracket now and what you foresee your income and tax brackets to be in retirement, one may decipher which one would be better at this given time. Just for education purposes, we tend to see people that are in their earlier working years, younger people, will tend to do Roth because they're hedging that they're making probably the least amount of money that they would be making throughout their work history, and they're wanting to save right now at a lower tax bracket. The traditional route would be for those individuals who are looking for a reduction of income or reducing their taxable income liability. And what I mean by that is, for easy math, let's just say you make $100,000 and you save $10,000 of that contribution into the 401k plan. That $10,000 pre-tax contribution is going to reduce your taxable income down to $90,000. So the government's going to tax you on that 90 grand rather than that $100,000. So that's an example of the traditional versus Roth. You can adjust that at any time. We tend to see people, will in their earlier working years do Roth, later working years do pre-tax, or looking for those deductions. One other fact is if you are looking to save as much money as you possibly can, but have a net effect, the lesser net effect to your take-home pay, or not have it impact your take-home pay all that much, then that traditional or pre-tax option is going to be the better route, because you may be saving, say, $50, but it's only going to drop your paycheck by, say, $39. So there's a little bit of a delta or difference between those two numbers. So I'm going to pause there. Are there any questions about traditional versus Roth?
No.
Okay. So the next question is going to be the how much. So depending on which one, traditional versus Roth, you select, how much is also equally important. The national average of individuals saving in their retirement plan from their money is 8%. So use that 8% number as kind of a watermark to get to or to be at. What's also important is there's a company benefit that's available to you as an employee if you are participating in the plan or contributing. And that match is called a safe harbor match. And that safe harbor match is a calculation based off of what you put in. And I'll explain that. The match is 100% on the first 3% that you put in, and then 50% on the next 2% that you put in. And another way to explain it is if you put in 1%, the company is going to give you 1, 2 for 2, 3 for 3. If you put in 4%, the company match would be 3.5. If you put in 5%, the company match would be 4. So in order to maximize that company match benefit, you would at least want to put in at least 5%. If you put in something greater than 5%, say 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or something greater, you're still going to receive that 4% maximum match. okay? And you can adjust your contribution rate at any time. If you want to go from 5 to 6, you can adjust that. If you need to go from 5 down to 0 or adjust it at any movement, you can adjust that at any time. So I'm going to pause there. Are there any questions about the company match or a contribution rate?
I have one question.
Yeah, go ahead.
If we have some savings now that we might want to put an initial investment in, can we do that?
So what do you mean by initial savings? Like, are you talking about like an old IRA account or an old 401k account that you've got at a previous company?
Or a savings account?
Yeah, so technically no. All of the monies that you're putting into a retirement plan or a 401k plan have to be driven through payroll, unfortunately. So if you are looking to say save, some additional money in a savings account that you have in a savings account, what would be best recommended is opening up an IRA account with like an investment provider. The easiest ones that I would say are probably like Fidelity or Charles Schwab. And going to Schwab or Fidelity and opening up an individual IRA, or an IRA is an individual retirement account, and you can open up a traditional IRA or a Roth IRA, and those limits of saving annually is $5,500 this year, and you can put in an additional $1,000 if you're over age 50. So those two limits would be something that you could save in an outside account that do not have to be basically contributions through payroll. You could just stash money away and get that deduction.
The other way to do it, Christopher, this happened before, is if it's a specific amount of money. For example, you can technically contribute 100% of your paycheck.
Correct.
As long as you don't break the barrier, which I think, Ian, today is like $18,000 or $18,500.
Correct. So yeah, you could adjust your paycheck if you've got a commission or something. If you wanted to allocate that specific amount or a larger amount, you could adjust your paycheck to or go to whatever degree, 50%, 75%, 100% into that account to front load it or even back load it. If we were getting closer to the end of the year and you wanted to put a lump sum money into it, you can do that. The IRS limits for 2018 are $18,500. If you're over age 50, you can put in an additional $6,000 for a total of $24,500.
So in effect, Christopher, for an example, if you had $2,500 in a savings account and you made $1,000 a month, you could put 100% of your paycheck in for almost 3 months and then reduce your contribution to whatever your normal amount was. And instead of having a payroll deposit, you use the money sitting in the savings account in lieu of payroll. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah, I got you.
Yep. No, great example. Thank you, Rob. So the contribution amount, again, can be adjusted. That flat dollar amount we kind of talked about and touched on. We really don't recommend putting in a flat dollar amount unless you are trying to achieve, say, that example that we had gone through, or trying to reach a certain contribution amount for the year. The reason being is that amount will come out of your paycheck regardless if you're working, say, part-time, out sick, or working a lighter schedule that week if you're hourly. So just be mindful. We do recommend putting a percentage, and then if you are trying to get to a flat dollar amount, maybe do a percentage of your gross pay or something that will get you to a bigger number if you're trying to reach that. For the contribution amount, again, those all can be adjusted at any time in the future. So whatever you do today is not set in stone. The national average is 8, as I mentioned. The recommended limit that you want to get to is 10%. So a lot of studies and research that's shown around the country is that 10% is kind of that magic number for everybody to be at from a savings rate. So whatever you can do, if I could shake everybody just a little bit right now and say whatever you can do right now to try to get up to that 10% level is going to help drastically improve your retirement outcome in the future. And what I mean by that is the quicker you can save 10% per year, the better off you'll be in retirement. So if you are contemplating maybe starting out at 5% or 6% or something now, is consider bumping up that contribution 1% every year into the future. So if you're at 5, next year go to 6, following year go to 7, And that 1% increase is really hardly ever seen or affected in your net take-home pay. And it's not going to go and change your lifestyle, but getting into that higher contribution amount is going to be very important for people throughout their working career to then have a asset account to live off of in retirement. So not to beat a dead horse on that, but is there any other questions on traditional versus Roth, the contribution amount at all before we hop over to investments? Okay. So on the top of the second page of the enrollment application or the PDF application, there's a list of about 30 or so investment choices. Part of Mark and I's job is, as advisors, is picking this investment menu back, but also rehashing it and reevaluating it every single quarter. So we have software and we analyze these funds to make sure they are top quartile and top performing funds in their respective asset class. Also, these funds are all institutional grade mutual funds, and they're the lowest investment expense ratio available in that specific fund class or that specific fund as well. So you have some phenomenal investments to pick and choose from that are also all low cost investment choices. There's both a mix of active versus passive investments. And what the difference is between active and passive is passive, you're going to buy the, say, index. And some people may be familiar with like the S&P 500 or the Dow. The S&P 500 is an index of 500 stocks. And a comparison is if you were to hire an active manager to manage that S&P 500, instead of just picking 500 funds and buying into those 500 funds like the index, is you would pay an active manager to pick the winners and losers in that 500 fund category. The difference between the two, there's also a kind of a comment in general is that active will then over the course of time fall back to passive investments. And there's really not a huge disparity between performance over a long-term period of time. So if you are going to be investing in, say, a 10-year time horizon, active versus passive, it's good to have both, but one may be better in a certain year versus the other, and over a course of a period of time, they kind of come back to an average. So great options, but we know that that doesn't help lead you to a good investment choice today, but also into the future. So part of our due diligence and advice and education to you as participants, we put together a quarterly asset allocation guide that goes over the investments that are in the plan to help you with your selections today, but also every quarter in the future. So the same investments are listed on this first left-hand column. The ticker symbols are on that third column. The asset classes that that fund and ticker represent is in that second column. And then in this top larger rectangle, we've put together 5 model portfolios based off of a risk tolerance. So depending on your time frame left until retirement, your risk tolerance, we've put together a diversified lineup that we would recommend you invest in based off of those core investment choices. So if you are, say, 25 years old, said, hey, I'm fine with taking a more aggressive path right now because I can afford to take risk, then boom, on that far right-hand column, that is our pick of the litter and our recommended path for you to invest in. It is a guide, so you can use that both in now but into the future. And the ask of the individuals that are going to be following these columns is a little bit more hands-on. So as we come out with these updates every quarter, the ask is for you to log in to the Retirement Planning Consultant's website and just make sure your percentages for all future contributions and current contributions are being allocated towards a new percentage. Because we do make slight adjustments. We made adjustments from the July report out from this October report. So we'd want those for participants that are following it to make those adjustments with a new update. For education purposes, the investors that are in their younger working years, 20s and 30s, they tend to be aggressive in nature because they can afford to take the risk. They're looking for growth in their portfolios rather than preservation. And then into 30s and 40-year-olds, and even into their 50s, we tend to see people in that moderate aggressive column or 65-35. And then folks that are in their late 50s, early 60s tend to switch over to that moderate or 50-50 column. And then in retirement, if you're past 60s, even to the 70s and 80s, we tend to see people in that moderate or conservative play. So I'm going to pause there. Is there any questions about the top larger kind of hands-on model? So option B, option 2 would be the hands-off model, would be selecting a target date fund based off of the date that you would retire or reach age 65. So the way you would do it is to find out what year it will be when you reach age 65, and that's going to plop you into one of these target date ranges in that second column, and that would be your most appropriate target date fund. And the way they work is you would go 100% into that one fund, because that fund is all diversified, all in that inside of that one fund. It would be like picking one of those columns, but inside of that one fund. So the bottom 4, or the bigger the year, is going to be intended for the person that's younger, because they're going to be retiring much later. So the 4 that I've highlighted in blue on the bottom, they're going to be more aggressive. They're going to be similar to that 80-20 model up to the top, but even the bigger years are actually going to be about 90% in equities. So more aggressive in nature. And then the next 4 are going to be for those individuals that are in their 40s, 30s, even into their 50s. And those are going to be for those individuals that are roughly about 60-40, 70-30 mix, even into that kind of moderate aggressive column as a comparison. And then as you get closer and closer to retirement, the next 3 are going to be similar to that 50-50 model. So right now, if we were to 2018, if you were 65 years old, you'd be retiring at 2018. That 2020 fund would be the most appropriate fund, and that would be roughly about a 50-50 portfolio today. And then it would de-risk continuation over that course of the retirement period into your 70s and 80s as well. So just to reiterate it, the funds start out at about 90% in equities, and then every 5 years it de-risks or reduces its equity exposure, and then ultimately becoming about a 50-50 portfolio at retirement date. So this is a little bit more of a hands-off approach. Whatever you decide today on the investments works similar to the allocation or your contribution amount, and you can change your percentage that you want to put in any of these funds at any time. You could essentially day trade this account if you wanted to. There is no cost of going in or out of, or however many fund changes you make. It's all included in the overall plan administration. So without any further comments on this, I just wanted to mention there is a money market account in here as well too. This money market account is kind of on a standalone side. The interest rate that is producing right now is around 1.5%. So if you are looking for more of a safe haven type approach, then that money market may be a piece or a sleeve of your overall retirement picture. Being mindful that we don't want folks that are in their 20s and 30s to invest in cash because you need an element of growth for 20, 30 years to hit your retirement goals. So being mindful that if people are going to select that money market account, that it might be just a small portion or a hedge against some other accounts that you may have as well. On the bottom of this document, the asset allocation guide, my contact information as well as Mark's contact information is here. Both office numbers and emails are good to reach out to us at any time. And we're here to talk to you as well. So this is not a one and done, as other participants will have and become eligible in the plan. We'll be hosting and doing these types of enrollment meetings. So feel free to reach out to us as you have questions that come up over the period of time, or even throughout this onboarding process of getting the plan kicked off. So I wanted to pause there before we touched on beneficiaries and rollovers. Was there any other questions that anybody has on the investments?
Ian, why don't you take a minute? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, basically, if we wanted to, we could pick and choose the percentages of where we wanted these to go. We don't have to necessarily choose exactly these guidelines,
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, correct. So you guys have full discretion over what your investments are. You have full autonomy. You can pick and choose whatever lineup that you want or whatever funds that you want as well. So that's kind of option 3, is you're free to do whatever else you want, or option 1. That's the most hands-on approach. So the most hands-on is you picking your own funds. Second one is using our guide to help pick those. And then the third is, just selecting one of those target date funds.
But the ones that you've chosen or outlined here are ones that you guys suggest?
Yeah, so we correct. Yeah, so we have software that we pay a bunch of money to analyze and review these funds. As a comparison, There's two intermediate term bond funds, this Dodge and Cox and this Vanguard intermediate term bond right in the middle of the screen. There's two of them. They're literally the exact same things. What they have similar holdings, very, very similar. If we're talking about types of fruit, and bananas and apples, these both are bananas. And we have software to analyze which one is going to give you the best possible outcome for a higher return and take the least amount of risk. So our recommendation is to pick this Dodge and Cox income fund over this Vanguard intermediate term bond fund. And the same goes for the three large blend options below. There's actually three in this one category, and we have confidence that this Vanguard total stock market is going to be the best one to select going forward. And there's also certain asset classes that we don't like at this given time, given the market, economy, things like that, global news. There's not a lot of exposure in international funds in these portfolios. There's actually very small. So there's certain funds that we would recommend being in, and there's other funds that we don't. But not to say that they're bad funds. These are all great funds. We have overweight and underweight in certain sectors because of that.
I have a question. The columns down below, it says choose the closest target date vintage in the year it will be at retirement age 65.
Mm-hmm.
65, that's not actually the retirement age today, is it?
Not necessarily, no. It's more around 67, but folks are retiring at 65. So if you're 65 years old right now, that's kind of what the government looks at as retirement. But for folks that are in their 30s and 40s, it's going to probably be closer to 67, even into the 70s. It really just depends on how much money you've saved and what your lifestyle is, and if you can live off of no more paychecks coming in, essentially.
Okay.
So it may be something where you've got, it could be 55 is your retirement date, and you want to invest based off of 55 years old or at retirement, or it might be 70 and you can adjust it as well. The best average and the way they've calculated all of these these ratios of allocation is that folks would choose the 65 kind of year that they would that year that they would reach age 65 as their target year.
Okay.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments?
Ian, take a minute. If you're not going to do it later, do it now. Take a minute and talk about withdrawing money from the plan.
Yes, so very good question. There are a couple, uniquenesses with retirement plans. These plans are really made for your retirement. There's the IRS rules and the Department of Labor rules almost locks down this money because they want to use it for retirement. The plan, they actually do not have a loan provision. So loans are not available in this plan. The only way to get money out of your plan is if you are no longer working for the company. So if you're no longer working for the company, that's what's called a qualifying event, and then you can take your money out. So the money that you've accumulated or rolled into the plan, those monies can be transferred out either to an IRA to keep it qualified so you don't have to pay taxes on it. You can roll it out to another company's 401k plan. So if you're no longer working with the company now, you switch companies and they've got a 401k plan, you can transfer that balance from this plan over to that plan. There's no taxes, no penalties, and that's probably the easiest and smoothest. You could take the money out of this plan and put it into what's called an IRA or individual retirement account of your choice at whatever firm you wanted, Fidelity, Charles Schwab, TD Ameritrade, those types of firms. And then the third is a cash out option. A cash out option is kind of the last resort. We tend to see people that may have, a smaller balance if they've got a couple $100 in their 401k account and they're like, hey, I'll take a $50 hit. It's not a big deal. Then the cash out option is something that might be a little bit more tolerable. But the cash out option is a last resort. The reason why I say that is if you are doing pre-tax contributions, you're going to have to pay the taxes on it. That's going to be withheld. And then there's also a 10% early withdrawal penalty. So if you take out money in any retirement account, an IRA, a 401k, and use it, those monies are subject to an early withdrawal penalty if you take that money out if you're before 59 and a half. So if you're younger than 59 and a half and you take those monies out, you would have to pay a 10% penalty plus whatever your effective tax rate. And that could be, 25, 30%, could be even more. So it could be a very large hit to your overall account balance or that portion of money that you're taking out. Okay. So with that, it's a great kind of transition over to one of the last two things that we'll talk about before we get to the rollover and roll-in form. We just want to briefly cover over the beneficiary designation form. Beneficiaries are very important. In the event that you pass away, the retirement assets that you've accumulated in this account or rolled into this account are deemed to who you wish. So make sure you are keeping that beneficiary information updated as life changes. People come and go in your life, marriage, divorce, kids, relatives, all that is make sure that that information is updated. You can add that information online as you're completing the online enrollment, or you can complete the paper form. The paper form we'll just look at, as you can see here, individuals' names. If you have a trust set up, you can name that trust as a beneficiary. As an example, husband and wife couple, the spouse would be listed as primary beneficiary at 100%, and then the two kids would be listed as contingent beneficiaries at 50% apiece. That would just be an example. And there's one quick little note on the bottom of this form that I want everybody to be aware of, and this applies not just to this form, but all beneficiary forms in general. If you are married, there's a spousal consent that's required if your spouse is not named primary beneficiary at 100%. So if you call it skipping your spouse or their individual or that individual is not first in line, they have to acknowledge this, as well as a witness notary needs to be present. So not trying to create any battles or arguments at the dinner table tonight, but it is an IRS rule and Department of Labor rule that the spouse has to acknowledge if they're technically being skipped of that beneficiary. Okay. And then the last thing is the plan account rollover form. So in the event that you've got an old IRA, an old 401k account, or a retirement account that's called being neglected, and you're not sure what it's invested in, how much it's cost, and you're not being tended to, you do have the opportunity of consolidating those assets to have it all in one place, and you can roll those monies in. There's a whole team at Retirement Plan Consultants that will help with that transition from that old company over into the new company or Retirement Plan Consultants and consolidate those for you. But it also works on the outbound as well. Is the monies that you've accumulated or rolled into this plan, you can transfer out as well. So the monies essentially kind of follow wherever you're working. The only limitation that people tend to see is if you've accumulated money in this retirement account and let's say you change jobs and you're not eligible for the new plan for 6 months or a year, then that money would most likely have to sit in this account for 6 months or a year until you're eligible to start in that new plan and roll those monies in. So there may be a little bit of a lag for that transfer to happen. As long as you're eligible in the plan, you could transfer that out to that new plan. So that's the information we wanted to cover. I wanted to leave just a few minutes for questions if there's any other items that anybody wanted to cover. The one piece to really end on is just time frame of, Rob, what payroll everybody's trying to kind of target and do a start date for that. The online enrollment is really instant. So as soon as you complete that online enrollment process, you'll have a username and password and you're set up in the system and everything's good to go. Now the paper forms, if you're going to complete those, it does take about 2 to 3 business days for RPC to enter in those that information and then be reflective on the website. So just want to be mindful of that as a time frame.
From a time frame perspective, I'm looking at the first payroll I'm going to shoot for either the last payroll in November or the first payroll in December.
Okay. So we got some time, a couple weeks. give or take. And then if everybody's on board with that, I would say if there's just an internal date that you guys want to set as a period of time, then that would be recommended if it's just mid-month to have everybody set up in payroll, and then have everybody set up on the website would be ideal.
Correct.
Okay. Well, great. Well, and then Rob, just for you, as you get closer and closer to that payroll date, that first run date, we'll be communicating further information about having that set up. And if there's any questions or how we can help, we'll definitely be here to walk you through that.
Perfect.
And if there's any other questions that either of you guys have, mention them now. If you want to ask offline questions or one-on-one questions, feel free to reach out to Mark or I. Our contact information is in the body of the email, and as well as that bottom of that asset allocation guide, and feel free to reach out to us at any time. All right, well, have a great rest of your day and enjoy the rest of the week, and hope you have a wonderful rest of the morning as well.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Ian.
Thank you.
Thank you all.